Councilman?
Neil, do you think I downsized appropriately on the big bag last week?
That is the tiniest backpack I've ever seen.
Why that big old thing? It fits the tablet just perfectly.
That's all you need.
You'll be able to handle it. Maybe I ought to sit down.
We're on. Okay, 6 o'clock. Welcome to the governing body meeting today, of January 11th. I call the meeting to order. If you will give your attention to Councilman Duncan for the invocation, and then remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mayor. I thought tonight it might be more appropriate. As we all know, earlier this week, we lost the life of a young boy, 7 years old, second grader here in our community due to a fire. So I thought it would be appropriate this evening just to have a moment of silence. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If the clerk would call the roll, please.
Mayor Padilla.
Here.
Council members Hiller. Here. Valdivia Acala.
Here.
Ortiz.
Here.
Emerson.
Here.
Kell.
Here.
Nager.
Here.
Dobler.
Here.
Duncan.
Here.
Lesser.
Here.
We have 10 present.
Thank you. Move on to presentations for this evening. I believe we have one from MPAA.
Yeah, at this time, have Mr. Eric Johnson from MTAA come up and present the information that was requested from the governing body.
Well, Mr. Mayor, council members, I
Mayor,
appreciate the
Mayor.
opportunity.
Consent agenda?
Pardon?
Do we need to do the consent agenda first?
Go ahead. We have the consent agenda after the presentation.
Oh, that's fine.
You have one job.
It was my fault.
It's maybe out of sequence, so Eric, if you'll bear with us as we try to follow an amended agenda. So if we could go to the consent agenda, if the clerk would read.
The consent agenda, item 3A, are the minutes of the regular meeting of January 4th, 2022, and there are no applications.
Okay, what is the pleasure of the body?
Second.
Motion and second to approve. Would you call the roll, please?
Council members Hiller.
Yes.
Valdivia Acala.
Yes.
Ortiz.
Yes. Yes.
Emerson.
Yes.
Kell.
Yes.
Nager.
Yes.
Dobler.
Yes.
Duncan.
Yes.
Lesser.
Yes.
Mayor Padilla.
Yes.
We have 10 voting yes.
Okay. Standing corrected, then we move on to number 4 on the agenda. Non-action items, if the clerk would read.
Item 4A is an update on the Metropolitan Topeka Airport Authority.
Welcome back, Eric.
Well, I do appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Mayor and council members, for being able to be here and give you a little update on the MTA. As you're aware, the MTA, Topeka Regional Airport, is a federal surplus property, and we have a number of regulations that we have to abide by. As a NIPIAS airport, which is a National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems, we receive funding not only locally, but through the Federal Aviation Administration's Airport Improvement Program, which includes both entitlement funding and discretionary funding. Due to the pandemic, the MTA has received funding from a few other sources as well, which is, I think, been provided to you in the letter that I sent to Ms. Younger. The projects that we identified for those funds are all AIP eligible projects, AIP Airport Improvement Program, but because they score so low, we wouldn't be able to compete for discretionary funding, and we don't receive enough entitlement funding to ever complete those projects. The CARES Act and the other grants that we received, totaling somewhere north of $19 million, will give us an opportunity to address most of the projects that we were looking at. We have some limitations. The first came along with the fact that the funding was split out between the two airports. Topeka Regional Airport received the bulk of the funds, and the Billard Airport received just a small portion of that, limiting us tremendously on what we were able to accomplish there. We received approval from the FAA to pool that money of all the grants and use those funds at either airport, which is why we identify the projects that we did. For Billard Airport with the new terminal building, the one we have right now was built in 1954 and is in poor condition, whether it's electrical, plumbing, HVAC, even the building facade is falling apart. So we're looking at funding for that. We would never receive AIP funds to complete that project. Also, the street leading into Billard Airport is falling apart. The pavement itself is in decent condition, but all of the water is flowing the wrong direction and towards the buildings rather than towards the drainage ditch. That's just another piece of the project that we'll address when we get to it. At Topeka Regional Airport, we have a fuel farm that was constructed sometime in the early 1950s. It is long outlived its useful service life. We have a second one that has been closed down and abandoned in place until we have an opportunity to remove it. And with this funding, we'll be able to replace the fuel farm and then remove the two old fuel farms, and eliminating an environmental issue for the future. Again, at Topeka Regional Airport, passenger boarding bridge that is at the terminal building is old. It was installed in 1985. It's in poor condition. While we don't have scheduled commercial service, we do have charter operations that take place up to including some of the largest commercial passenger aircraft in the world. Having a passenger boarding bridge that operates safely is important to us. Not only is the passenger boarding bridge failing, but the pedestal that it's mounted on is collapsing into the building. So we want to address that. And then with one of the other grants that we were offered, that we've accepted, is to expand the sterile area in the terminal building at Topeka Regional that will allow for social distancing The grants, 2 of the grants are limited to addressing COVID concerns through this pandemic. And that project has been approved by the FAA to allow us to expand that passenger sterile area, the screening area, within the building footprint. We've already received some idea of what the cost would be and what it will take to complete the project. And the other piece of that is to improve the circulation and filtration of air within the terminal building. Again, while we don't have passenger service right now, we do have charter operations. The existing sterile area will accommodate less than 80 people. So even a small charter operation overfills that screening area. So that's what we're doing with the funding that we've received. We hope we have some additional funds left over from that we're able to address the maintenance facility for Topeka Regional. We have millions of dollars worth of equipment and no place to store them. So we're trying to come up with a facility that we can put all of our snow removal equipment in one location. Right now, we're storing it in 4 different buildings, spread over more than a mile apart from one another, just to keep them indoors and out of the weather. When we get to talking about air service, which is probably the most important function of my job, is to try and bring air service back to this community. We are in a challenging time right now. There's 2 realities we have to face. One is the fact that it's going to take a minimum revenue guarantee to bring an airline back to Topeka. And that's the same for any community that's trying to attract air service. The other is the pilot shortage is very real. They're expecting another 15,000 pilots to retire in the next year or so. And there's currently 500 pilots a year entering that field. So we're seeing a huge issue with that. One airline has grounded and parked over 100 regional jets, which is something that directly affects our community. They've left 11 markets. Another airline left 9 markets. We're losing routes left and right from the air transportation system. Those are very real. That's mostly affecting the daily operator. Our goal is to bring in here. But there is another alternative that we need to consider as well, and that's the less than daily carrier, which we have a better opportunity to bring to Topeka. Less than daily is the destination style airline. And I think that we certainly have the ability to support that. Again, we have to work through this pandemic in order to get on that list. We work with a well-known, nationally recognized consultant in our attempts to attract air service. They have an excellent reputation, and we've been with them for a number of years. And the important part of it is to make sure that we continue attending air service conferences, that we're meeting with the airline planners. We have in the past brought airline planners to the Topeka community to show them the area, to show them the terminal building that we have available, which is in fantastic condition overall. We provide market studies to the airlines so they see what we have to offer. And I know that some of the language in the leakage study that I provided to you all sometimes doesn't make a lot of sense, but a PDU is a passenger daily each way. We have over 1,500 passengers daily from the Topeka area, Topeka over to Lawrence, departing every day. And we're missing out on that opportunity. All of that, 99% of that, I should say, is going to Kansas City, Missouri. That's a lost opportunity for us. And I believe strongly that having a viable airport in the Topeka community, it would be an economic plus for us to grow. But we can't do that alone. We need help to make that happen. Mr. Cochran and I attended a conference in Florida talking to airlines, and I'm sure that he was a little perplexed by some of the language that they spoke, but overall, it was a good conference and gave us an opportunity to speak with planners. One drawback to that is we recognized after well into the pandemic, that all the planners that we developed relationships with had taken the buyouts. The airlines are recognizing now, and even in front of Congress, recognized or acknowledged that they incentivized too many people, pilots and planners and the like, to retire early, take the buyout. And they're all suffering for that now. $54 billion, and now we're looking at shortages, and we're developing new relationships with those planners. But we're on a good track. We have a good reputation, and the less than daily carriers that we've spoken with in the past are very familiar with the Topeka community. The notes have been passed along, if you will, so they recognize what we have to offer. And we continue to work on that relationship and attract people or attract airlines to this market. It is going to be a challenge, and as I said, we can't do that alone. We need partnerships with the city, with Shawnee County, with businesses committing to using airlines in the future. Obviously, the destination airlines aren't set up specifically for businesses, but if we can bring that destination airline in, it'll help us prove our market, prove that we have the passenger base to support their operation. Airlines don't come to a community, or will not come to a community because an airport wants them. They come to a community where the community needs them and will support them. We did have United Airlines in here in 2014. We worked hard to bring that airline in. The community didn't fail that airline. We tried at every level to support what they were doing, but they had to show up, and they failed to do that repeatedly. Their last flight in the evening had a 23% on-time performance. That last flight being that late, that often, would cause delays and cancellations the following morning. So don't let the past experience of United keep us from going after the next airline. As I said, it's going to be challenging. Pilot shortage is real. The minimum revenue guarantee is something that we need help with, to attract the next airline. In the meantime, we're going to go after that destination airline and hope that we can use that to prove our market and continue growth. Any questions so far, comments, concerns?
Any questions from the body member? Any questions? Mr. Johnson?
No, I have a couple more things, but I was going to jump into a couple other things that we're working on. We have plenty of other work that needs to be done. We have a number of buildings that we lease. We've changed our method of leasing those properties from what's been done in the past. Since 2008 until now, because of the way we've changed, we've increased our leasing revenues better than 40%, which helps us control our mill levy, which is important to the taxpayer, of course. But that goes a long way in building that revenue, but we also still have to develop more properties. We have T-hangers that we need to address. The cost of T-hangers is substantial. An A-bank T-hanger for new construction is greater than $700,000 for 8 small T-hangers. I believe that our best method moving forward is what we're doing right now, and that is to rehab and repair the existing T-hangers. At some point, we've identified in our master plan where we're going to put new T-hangers, but it's a matter of making sure that the funding is available. All of the funding that we've identified, that I've identified to you tonight, from the different CARES Act or CRISA grants that we received, we're not allowed to use for T-hangers. So we're restricted on how we can do that. $2 million of that money can only be used for sterilization of the terminal buildings to address COVID concerns. And that's challenging. The rest of the leasing opportunities that we have with our different hangars and non-aeronautical buildings, all of that is used to go towards the aeronautical side of the house to, again, improve things that address the aviation industry. Now, any questions?
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of questions. So overall, $19 million in COVID relief funds, correct?
Yes, sir.
What's your annual budget?
Annual budget's about $5 million, depending on how you look at it. We put some funds away for FAA matching. Some people like to consider what we get from the FAA as part of our budget, but it really is not.
So mill levy raises $5 million or less than that?
About 3.6, I believe.
Okay, so CARES Act represents about how many years of your budget?
Well, it's quite a large chunk.
5-6 years?
It's, yes.
Can any of those funds be used for the minimum revenue guarantee?
No, sir, they can't. Again, restricted on what we can use it for.
But you can use them, you can use those funds for operations, correct?
Yes, sir. We can show, there are a number of things we could use it for. Operations and personnel cost, capital improvements, development. We can't use it for a minimum revenue guarantee. We do have funds identified in our budget set aside, and we're about halfway to where we need to be for a minimum revenue guarantee that we've identified through the budget that can be used for that purpose.
Okay. Seems like if you could use the COVID relief funds for operations, you could designate some of your existing budget for minimum revenue guarantees.
But that cuts into what we were trying to do with our capital improvements.
I understand that.
But I do, yes, sir. That is true. It can be used for that purpose. The FAA, of course, anything that you try to do with the CARES Act grant, for example, needs approval from the FAA. One of the things that can be used for is debt service. We try to get a little, I think of the word, creative on how we can use that for debt service to build a hangar or whatever. But the debt service has to be pre-existing, and we have no debt. So it's something that we're willing to take to the FAA on all of it. And as I said, we have identified funds for at least a portion of the minimum revenue guarantee.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Johnson, thanks for your presentation. I guess I wasn't quite clear on the ARPA money. You said about 19 million, but in the thing it's actually showing like 16.9 for Topeka Regional and 30,000 for Dillard.
Yes, sir.
And is that actually some of the money?
That's the CARES Act. We have two more grants that are identified on the second page.
And I understood you said that they were earmarked. I guess to me, it's very strange that such a small little number went to Builder. $30,000 is almost less than the guy made who, for the hour he did the stuff with the federal government.
We had Senator Moran on the phone.
And I love Senator Moran. Good guy.
He called me when this was first announced, and told me, Eric, you have this grant for Topeka Regional. And I said, how? Why? We looked at other airports within the state, We're the second highest grant amount offered in the state of Kansas. Garden City was the only one that received more than we did. We don't understand the formula. Senator Moran didn't understand the formula. He went to the FAA to try to understand the formula. And it was quite confusing. And the lower the debt service, the greater the amount of money that you received. Why the disparity? Why the difference between Billard receiving 30,000 and Topeka Regional 16 plus? I can't explain that. But that is exactly why we went back to the FAA and asked them to authorize us to pool that money so it's not so lopsided. We could use, if we identified projects that would be approved by the FAA, because again, all the projects would have to be approved. But if we went to the FAA and said, we have $16 million worth of projects that we want to do at Billard, we could use that money at Billard. So with their authorization, we were able to pool that money into one pot.
Okay, so even though it came in twice, in the end, it doesn't matter because we can put it together?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying that. So with that, I was trying to feverishly make notes as you were. Oh, so one of the things you had in there was redoing a new terminal lab builder, which I agree is badly needed.
Yes.
And I guess, you know, we right now as a city are struggling with, I guess, the same thing, how to best use these funds, right?
Yes, sir.
And we're doing a pretty elaborate thing. We're having a meeting this Saturday, a public meeting, to get input on what we should do. What are you guys doing towards that, getting community input or input from the users, like at the airport over there?
Kind of backtracks on how we went about that. And it goes back to the master plan. And a master plan with an airport is a little bit different than your normal master plan or what you might think of a master plan. We identified these projects well in advance. These are identified in our master plans to say at some point we need to do these. And then we have a public meeting. I will say it's sparsely attended, but we do have public meetings. When we get to this terminal building, we're going to include the stakeholders. We're going to include for the design to make sure that we address the concerns or the needs of the end user. Ultimately, the idea is to make sure that we meet the needs of the aviation community. We'll have buy-in from those stakeholders during design.
Okay. Fantastic. And as far as the other projects, I mean, I don't know how much of this 19 million that's taking, but will there be some other discussion on the other projects?
Well, the other projects, the road at the terminal, or at the Billard Airport, that's a small project by comparison. That's simply, we need to deal with the water drainage. Billard is absolutely flat. Water doesn't move.
Yeah.
And we need to address that. Soil conditions, we've been told by someone that we'd make a heck of a lot of money if we opened up a gravel pit. It's great for that. But the water just doesn't move there. So we're needing to address that and get the water away from the buildings. That'll help us years down the road. The fuel farm replacement, we're absolutely talking to the FBO. And not only are we looking at a fuel farm replacement at Topeka Regional with this grant, we're looking at a fuel farm replacement at Billard, but that'll be out of the MTA budget. Both of the fuel farms are extremely old. They need to be addressed. So Topeka Regional, because of the size, we're looking at 100,000 gallons of Jet A storage. We're involving the FBO and have involved already the FBO in those discussions to determine, is that adequate? Is that something that we'll be able to work with, and is that something they'll be able to work with? The funding has absolutely skyrocketed. I mean, the cost is skyrocketed. We initially expected about a $2.5–3 million fuel farm. It's double that, just because of cost of materials. So everything that we had planned on doing is being scaled back because of the cost right now. And unfortunately, we have a deadline of I believe June of '24, to have everything completed. Everything that's on this list has to be done. The last check has to be cashed by June of '24. That doesn't give us a lot of time, but that's the deadline identified in the grant.
Including the terminal?
Including the terminal.
They can start.
That's, yes, sir. Yes, sir. And that's under design now.
Thank you, thank you. And first of all, before I launch into this, a couple of weeks ago, I said a thing here that, you know, I don't know how much time I have left in this job. Can't afford to, if you're self-employed, it's hard to, you can't afford to do this very long, I guess. So one of my things I've been saying for the last couple of months is, no more status quo, we have to grow. So please, please don't take anything I'm going to say personally, but I just feel like we're getting to a point where we have to grow our community. And I see our airports are our front door to so many businesses. I know a lot of people probably think our airports are a bunch of millionaires out there having fun. It's not. It's people coming in to go to work. It's companies coming to do business here, and they are. I want our airports to be just a welcome mat to Topeka. So I guess first of all that, but we asked in the questions we had to, and I thought it was in the response, but I guess that was a separate letter you sent to us about selling the properties out at Forbes. And I'm kind of thinking, when we talk about airlines, we need the more people in that area, the more demand, the more fuel you're selling, the more fuel income you're going to get, the more people will be flying out of Forbes. And it just seems to me if we sold the land and got it back on the tax rolls, the MTA would see a yearly revenue from it, and the city and the county would also get their share, which right now we're not getting. And today I just took a quick look, and I believe there's about 400 acres out there on the land side, of which only about 192 are currently occupied by buildings. And just 2 buildings across from the MTA, I think the only privately owned buildings in there pay $166,000 a year in taxes to you guys, the city and the county. And I guess to me it seems like if we got this stuff on the tax roll, sold it, and let people come in and invest, we'd have more jobs there, we'd grow the tax revenue. And it would just be this spiral up. And that's, you're never going to have enough money as the authority to go out and build new buildings on 200 acres, right? And lease them. Right. So I guess that's kind of my pitch, that we need to start growing. We can't just have the status quo, all this empty vacant land setting. Because right now you don't get anything for most of that land. You don't get rent from most of those empty lots out there, I think.
Correct. And there are limitations. Being a federal surplus property, there's limitations on what we can do with that land. The FAA frowns on selling land. It can be done, but the justification has to be there. Selling it for a one-time purchase price may or may not be approved by the FAA. I can't make that determination. It would be, we can present it to the FAA. They like to see us receiving revenue on those leases. All of that non-aeronautical leasing revenue goes to support the aeronautical side of the house. I mean, we have miles and miles of pavement that we maintain. We have a brand new runway, the longest runway in the state of Kansas, and probably the best runway in the state of Kansas, at Topeka Regional Airport. We can accommodate any aircraft in the world. The largest aircraft in the world has been in to Topeka Regional Airport to pick up helicopters that won't fit in the C5. So we support that. The only aircraft that we are challenged with is the new fueler, the new aerial refueler, the KC-46. But there are ways to address what we have. The FAA's idea on selling property, they look very closely at that. I'm not saying it can't be done, but it does limit our ability in the future if we do lease property to someone for a ground lease, a Coca-Cola, a FedEx, something like that. That's producing revenue for us just with the ground lease.
Right, but how much does it produce for the city or the county?
I see your point.
Zero. And
yes.
And furthermore, it keeps, depending on what type of ground lease you'll do, you can't go and get a bank loan for a 10-year thing or something. It has to be 30, 40, 50 years. And I, as I said in the question, a criticism I've gotten, or a complaint I've gotten, excuse me, is that you guys now want to limit the length of leases so people can't build a new building. It's hard, the numbers won't work. I know the chairman of your board now is a banker, so he can, I think he would back me up on that. You have to, a bank's not going to loan money to build a multi-million-dollar building that in 5 years reverts to the MTAA.
Because of some pending legal issues, I've been advised not to get into lease terms and so on, but I'd be happy to discuss that at another time with you.
Okay.
I guess then just to follow up on that, if I'm going to walk down the path with you and the board of we need to hang on to those 200 acres for future, great. What is our vision then for the next 10, 15 years for those 200 acres? I mean, what is the plan that's been laid out that says this is why we're holding on to that property?
We do advertise that property, both on our website, LoopNet, trying to generate interest, and we're working with someone new to improve our marketing efforts to advertise that property. I believe that at our next board meeting, we're going to be talking a little bit more about how to develop the aeronautical side of the house. Aeronautical and non-aeronautical, they're tied together. But there is a need to keep that non-aeronautical revenue stream moving. I'm not saying we can't sell land. It can be done. It has to be justified to the FAA to get a land release to do that. But it can be done. It's just not something that we want to do, and it's something that would take away our ability at a later date. And I understand what you're saying about the city county doesn't receive any tax revenue from that, but it does reduce when we're able to increase our revenues. It keeps us from jumping up on the mill levy for the MTA. So there is a need for that leased land or that vacant land. We do want to develop it. We do want to see other people come in and develop it. And as I said before, I can't go into specifics on lease terms, but we certainly be happy to talk to you at a later date with that.
Is the land that the KDHE lab currently on owned by the MTAA?
The old hospital ADHE portion?
Yeah, I mean, isn't part of their lab still out there?
That's state property, sir.
Okay.
Councilman List?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Couple questions. First off, I would say that the majority of this council, as well as the GTP and JADO, has identified our next economic development area is the airport and the fact of having the largest runway, as you discussed, et cetera, et cetera. And that is number one priority for us now moving forward. Tell me, two things. Tell me, as we look that way in that direction, tell me economic development wise, under your leadership, what we've accomplished and then secondarily, tell me, as we move that way, tell me why you're the right guy to lead us down the economic development pathway as the next focus area for JADO, for GTP, and for this council.
Well, I think it's a team effort. We work with the Chamber of Commerce, work with Molly Howie, and we have met with her and their consultants that they've hired for doing just that, and that is pursuing those aeronautical developments. So absolutely, and we've invited the Chamber's consultants to speak at our next board meeting, so they can present that information directly to our board. There is no one person, group, body that is standalone going to take on the economic development arm of it. It's a partnership, and I believe firmly that the group at Go Topeka and the Chamber of Commerce, excellent at this part of it. We'll work closely with them, and we'll do everything we can to accommodate the needs of development or for development.
So you didn't answer my question. My question was, what economic, under your leadership, what economic development have you led for us there, and why are you the right person to help lead us? Because there's got to be a CEO and there's got to be a leader. I agree. There's got to be partnerships. I didn't really appreciate, the statement that under United Airlines, the community failed the airlines and not showing up. That's not the kind of talk that I usually would see as far as a partnership. But I asked two specific questions. What have you done economically, development-wise, under your leadership for the airport there? And secondarily, as we move forward with the primary goal of that area is our next hub of development for the city, why are you the right guy to do that? Same question I would ask anybody downtown for downtown development.
First, I'd like to clarify, if that's what I said, I misspoke. The community did not fail United. United failed the community. They didn't show up. The airline did not show up. The community wanted to support it. Former Mayor Wolgast planned 5 different trips. He had an 80% failure rate because the airline either delayed or canceled his flight. So my point was exactly the opposite of that. No, the community did not fail United, not by any stretch. On the other side, as far as economic development goes, looking at the existing properties that we have out there, we changed our scope, our method from what had been done in the past, turning buildings over at below market value, fair market value, to someone to develop, and we received no real revenue from that. We changed our operation to make improvements to the buildings and increase revenues from leasing by better than 40%. And we'll continue to do that and work with the Go Topeka or Chamber or whoever to continue to attract air service or new business. And we're certainly open to new ideas on how to make that happen. I have 30 plus years of experience in the aviation industry. There's a whole book of different rules and regulations that we have to abide by. It's not my intention to put off economic development by any stretch of the imagination. We need that to grow. We need that to attract new service. We need the businesses to identify their need for air service, and we certainly want to bring new business into the Topeka community. I agree with the statement that was made earlier by Councilman Emerson that we're the front door to the community. Unfortunately, it's not a door that's being used very often right now because we don't have that commercial service. That's a huge piece of what we're doing. That's our main focus, is to bring air service into Topeka. That is a piece of economic development. I have a lot of experience in working in the aviation industry and working with airlines. This is a challenge. This is a greater challenge than I've witnessed in other communities. It's a change of habits over time, but it's something that I think this community can do.
Let me ask you then, final question, and I do understand that you can't discuss the lease terms in regards to the pieces of litigation that are going on right now, but I don't understand why we can't talk in generalities about lease terms.
In what fashion?
Well, there's been several questions. I'll refer back to Mr. Emerson in regards to a couple of the lease questions that he had that you said we can't discuss because of pending litigation. I don't think anybody's asking you to talk about the several pieces of litigation in regards to that. I think what we're asking is, why can't we fundamentally in this format talk about leases and how those are handled? I don't quite understand why that can't be broached in this conversation.
I've been advised to not get into the terms right now because of the pending legal issues. But again, I'd be happy to discuss that at a later time.
I don't know what that means. We brought you in front of the community to discuss various things, and I understand that's what you've been advised on, but what you're telling me is if I pick up the phone tomorrow or Joe Smith picks up the phone to call you and talk to you about lease terms at the airport tomorrow, you can have that phone conversation, but you can't have it here in a public forum. Is that what you're telling me?
I would like to have my legal counsel assist me in answering those questions.
Fair enough.
So with what you're planning to do with this money, I understand there are certain things that are overdue, like you said, the fuel farm.
Yes, sir.
But what is kind of your almost number one goal out of this that seems like a feasible, we can hit this goal of being I think you put it as a destination where is that more like a charter where we kind of have a place where almost a chartered flight to, like, let's say Columbia, South Carolina, or even a part-time commercial airline or full-time commercial airline? What's kind of like almost like the goal that you guys are shooting for? So that way, as a person that in the next couple of years, once my daughters are out of the house, I plan on doing a lot of traveling. I would love to be able to fly out of Topeka. But as of right now, that's not an option. And I would love to just go places, but I just need to know kind of where we're looking at long term, 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, having almost like these goals we need to be hitting to make sure that we're actually getting something of that nature of like a destination where we kind of want to use as a charter airport, that we can work with the city can work with you to have like some type of Greater Topeka or someone else working to work those flights, to get those flights booked, or even a part-time where the flight attendants walk off, they work the gate, and it's just 2 or 3 flights a week, or like you said, even in a full-time situation.
The destination type airline that I spoke of does exactly what you're saying. It is taking you to a destination, a vacation resort area, whether it's Vegas or Orlando, something like that. 2 or 3 times a week, 2 weeks or 2 times a week is what's been discussed in the past. Pre-pandemic, we were on that road. We were well established. We were looking at what's next, and we were in good position. We had a great relationship, and we still have a great relationship with the airlines. But it's reestablishing that relationship. Our goal is to bring in that destination service, using that to show that we can support the local community, can support that airline to that destination. We had, in 2006, we had an airline in here that did the Vegas trips. We had about a 90% load factor on those flights. There was prior to me being there was a lack of partnership between the airport and the airline. And the airline pulled out. It's as simple as that. The airline wants a partner. We didn't offer that pre-2006, 2008. We do that now. We can do that. We've offered that, and I think in the next couple of years, you're definitely going to see that happen. But it's a matter of, right now, pandemic's created a lot of issues for the airline industry. it's created some challenges for airports in maintaining the service that they have. Airlines are pulling out of established communities because of the pilot shortage, or reducing their number of flights that they offer. The destination is a different story, and I think that's our best opportunity to grow and provide that to the residents in Topeka. We had a couple pre-pandemic, of course, charter operations that, public charters, that are advertised on websites and on our website, that you can book a flight, you can take off for 3-4 days. The cost is very reasonable. We've got to get them flying again. The pandemic's created a lot of issues for the aviation industry. But yes, sir, bringing that destination service back is critical.
Now, would they be, is the plan set destinations? Like you said, there's back and forth to Vegas, but I think that can only live so long with most destinations. And I think it almost needs something where you're making sure you're giving at least enough variety for people to want to keep on coming back. You keep on going to the same place after a while, for the most part, for most people, they don't want to go back anymore. And after you go through so many people, you're going to be, your flights are going to start dwindling in size. So
our conversation did include multiple cities, multiple destinations that we spoke of in the past. So you're right. You'd have a selection. That's the goal. So.
Councilman Dobler?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a comment. While I'm making that, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to ask Mr. Pravarnik a question. I see him seated in the audience. Very short question, if he's willing to come up. Thank you. I'm a little bit ambivalent about growth at Topeka Regional, because frankly, not 1 square foot of that airport is within the city limits. So even the tax that's generated there does not benefit the city. I think this isn't a question we're going to answer tonight, nor are you going to answer it, but I guess I'd look to the city attorney to do some research and see what it would take for us to annex the entire airport. Now my question for Mr. Pravarnik, if you would.
Don't go far. Yes, sir.
Matt, thanks for coming up.
Yeah.
How important is daily passenger service to this community, to you, in terms of growth of this community?
It's critical. It's critical for, some of the verticals that we have from a tourism standpoint, from a Visit Topeka standpoint. We do miss out on a lot of opportunities to generate more transient guest tax, which Councilman Duncan chairs that task force and does a really good job of. We do miss out on opportunities to grow employment in the community because of the distance that, every once in a while we'll say, well, you can get to MCI in 55 minutes, but you have to drive fast to get there in 55 minutes. So there's a little bit of a cutoff. Sometimes it's 60 minutes. And so we do miss out on quite a bit of economic development opportunity. And then the other thing too is just, you're asking about that trend, that commercial air service and that passenger service. We also, and we actually have now, I wanted to mention that the consultant that Go Topeka has engaged, that is in partnership with the Department of Commerce. And the Department of Commerce has come to us and said, you have such an amazing asset in Billard, in your airport, both of your airports. We have had such success in Salina, we would like to share in the cost of bringing an aviation consultant in. And I'm here to tell you that we worked on, pre-pandemic, we worked on a project that's still in our hopper, that's a big one. And it's aviation manufacturing, maintenance, repair, and operations. And today's my 6-year anniversary. When I came here, there was no discussion of ever having aerospace or aviation as an industry sector. And I believe that Molly would agree. I think we have 7 or 8 in our prospect list right now that we're actively working because of these assets that we have.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it.
And Mayor Padilla and Councilman Kell, sorry I wasn't here last week. I was traveling.
Thank you, Matt. Councilman, did you have another question? Okay. Councilman Emerson?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, Mr. Johnson, I guess, going back to leases.
Yes, sir.
So I understand you don't want to talk about the lease terms on buildings, right? But lease term on land, what are you offering?
We do offer land leases, to fit the needs. And we've offered different terms. I'd like to hold off on explaining or getting into the details of lease terms
Okay.
at this time.
Is any of the land then for sale? You know, you mentioned that if someone wanted to buy it, we could do that, but we have to go to the FAA. So how do people, is that marketed that way?
It's not marketed that way. It's marketed for lease. If that's a direction that we're going to take, then we would have to get the land release. We'd have to justify it. I think it would be appropriate to get that discussion going with the FAA in advance to see what their take is going to be on that. And we can certainly do that before we market it that way. I wouldn't want to market a piece of land for sale and have the FAA deny that.
Just though as a data point, you know, I'm a pilot, I'm a little over 1,000 hours, been flying for about 20 years. Not a good pilot, but a pilot nevertheless. Yeah, a lot of people will tell you that, actually. True statement. But I guess, you know, I flew into a lot of airports, and a lot of airports I see sell chunks of land, and they are just like us. They're former Air Force bases, and they've sold. And I'll tell you one I know of is Salina. You can go and buy land right now on the land side of the Salina Airport. Now, they'll only lease the hangars, but I can tell you, 15, 30 years, they're great with that. They want long-term tenants that they're going to invest in buildings and be there. So I guess I'm sorry, but it just rings a little hollow that the FAA won't let us do this when every other place I go seems to do it. So
I'm not suggesting the FAA won't let us do it. I'm saying the FAA needs to authorize the sale. They need to approve the land release for sale.
sure.
We
but-
haven't taken that path.
And this will be the last thing. I'll let you go after this. But I guess though, from my perspective, if you're not even having that as an option for people, right? I mean, if you're Hertz rent a car, somebody's not going to think they can come in and buy the car from you, right? If you're only advertising it to lease it to them, right? Or you're not selling it to them.
Right.
So it just seems a big leap for someone to come out just out of the woodwork and say, we want to come to Topeka, but we want to buy this land. Oh, well, it says it's for lease. And I don't know, I guess, yes, I'd love for you to have the discussion because again, I just see, I mean, Johnson County Executive Airport, all these airports, Garmin has a nice new building there. And maybe they don't own it, but I think they do. Everyone else can't be wrong, right?
And I'm not suggesting that anyone's wrong. I'm not suggesting what we're doing is wrong. I will certainly look into it. We'll have that conversation, see what's involved, and see what it would take. At least we could have that, conversation at a later date to tell you what we found, what the benefits are.
Well, again, the only thing is, as I told you, I'm not going to be around forever. My only thing is when. I mean, can you come back in a month? Tell us that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I would love to. I'm going to have you do that.
Yeah.
Because again, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but we got to grow. We got to grow Topeka. We got to grow our economy here. So
The growth in Topeka for the airport is extremely important. We understand that. I've been saying that since 2006 when I got here. My very first meeting with the president of the Chamber of Commerce was, how do we get air service in here? Air service is critical to the growth of a community.
I agree, but
Building around the airport
if you get 100
is as
companies
critical.
out there with employees, you'll have more use for your air service.
And of course, we count those businesses within the community, not just what's at the airport, but, all of it.
Right.
We're open to different ideas on how to develop
Thank you for being here tonight.
the area.
Further questions from the body? I have a couple myself, Eric.
Yes, sir.
If you will stand. Just to follow up a little bit on the discussion, or from Mr. Emerson and Mr. Dobler, I think I get the feel that we all agree that aeronautics is a top priority, but I still think that maybe the idea that we, as we continue with that effort, that we look seriously at what else is available for us to make MTAA or Forbes attractive to bring in those airline services or other businesses by utilizing the land that you have and the buildings and the property that you have. I think that's the thing that I'm hearing, and that I would like a discussion about when you feel more comfortable about what changes and strategy you've done with regards to the leasing policies and how many buildings you have out there that are leased, what condition are those buildings? You mentioned repair and replace as opposed to brand new. You mentioned T-hangers. Sky Pilot here probably knows what T-hangers are, but not everybody does. A little explanation of what those are and if they're critical to the use of that property out there at Fort. So I think there are a lot of questions that we have that if you're given another opportunity, you can discuss it with your board, your council, whatever, about what you can share. I think that would be important for this body to hear because it's not the first time I've heard the idea of maybe annexing. And I want to make sure if we do that, we do it for the right reason and do it in the right way. And so I think you can get the feeling that we see how important Forbes is.
It's extremely important, sir.
But
I
we
agree.
just want to see some, I guess, difference in what we've seen, not to criticize what has gone past, but that doesn't mean that we can't move forward in another direction if we really agree on that. So, Eric, I appreciate you coming up here and giving us the information. Before I sign off, any other questions from anyone? Thank you again, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, sir.
We'll move on to, let's see, number 4, discussion item B. The clerk would read.
Item B is discussion of the 2023 social service grant recommendations for calendars, priorities, scoring sheet, and continuation of contract with vendor.
Mr. City Manager?
I believe Councilwoman Hiller will be facilitating this conversation.
Okay. Councilwoman?
Thank you, Mayor. Hopefully my voice will hold out here. This is an annual event, which everyone but Mr. Kell perhaps knows, and so we, our social service grant committee meets throughout the year. The beginning of the year, we work on the actual whatever we need to do to get the grant making process going, and then at the end of the year, we work on reviewing how that went and whether there would be any changes that we would recommend to this body, to the process, to the vendor, to the, all the way down to the words, so that we can position ourselves for the coming year. So this year, we had 3 meetings on our process in the fall, and we also had a special meeting about outcomes. We sort of, the last couple of years, the committee has developed a special focus meeting in the fall each year. This year it was a very good one on outcomes, which are fundamental to the grants that we make. In terms of the results of that process for you, we've got the package for you here today for 2023. I'm going to go through it pretty briefly, I think. But I want to remind everyone that it's critical that the council members review all of these documents. If you haven't already, please do it before voting time next week. Because what we've learned is that if the council needs to be fully informed so that when we vote through this process and then either our staff or a vendor handles the applications and the scoring and the awards process on our behalf next year, that it's rock solid, that we all understood what it was going to be and very intentionally supported it. Because that way the concerns and appeals can be handled at the committee level and just these final decisions brought forth. This year was the second year that we had United Way as a vendor handling the applications process. And we were pleased with them. And so, and the agencies were as well, at least that's what they reported to us. So we certainly support continuing the outsourcing of the project management to United Way. In terms of particulars on the forms, there are three. The first one is before you right now, and it's the timeline. Other than adjusting dates for the calendar, that is pretty much what it was last year. The significant change I would point out is that down at the bottom, there was an agreement that next year the special session would be on what they're dubbing a gap analysis. And that means that the committee has set for next year's committee to look community-wide at what services are being funded, regardless of who is funding them, and whether there are gaps in service and so on, as a preliminary before setting priorities again. The next sheet is our priorities sheet. Once again, actually virtually no change. The priorities that you see in front of you right now are the same as they were in the past. The minimum and maximum grants are the same. We started last year with a requirement that an agency have been in existence at least 2 years, or a program as well, before applying to the city for funding, so that it had a track record. Also on the basis that it's easier to get startup money than long-term money. That worked out well. There was some discussion about it, but we did not change that at all, nor did we change the dollar amounts or the process, which are there at the bottom in what we're recommending to you. The scoring sheet, which is the third of the three, is also largely unchanged. It is still a 100-point system. We did review carefully each one of the sections. The categories are the same. We reworked what you would see on the second page under capacity. There's a new question there. Reallocated the points and beefed up the language, and credit United Way for helping with this, to give a broader look at both the budgeting that the agency does as well as the program management. So you can read those specifics unless somebody wants to go through them this evening. To offset the points on that, we gave an extra 5 points to that new section that's there in the middle of the page that you're looking at. In order to do that, on the scoring of grant administration being effective, which prior was 10 points, we dropped that to 5. That, by the way, when we shifted to having the vendor and the 2-year process, required that United Way check either with the city, if the city had been the funder in the prior year, or another party that had been the funder if it had been someone from the outside. 2 years ago when that started, there were a couple of bugs, but those have been worked out, and it seems to have worked well as well. So the committee is recommending for next week's vote that we approve that the council approve the 3 documents as updated, as well as approve the committee's recommendation to continue with United Way as a funding and project management agent. With that, we stand for questions. Or first, actually, if any of the other committee members have comments that they wanted to make. Other committee members were Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala and Councilman Emerson.
Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Karen, or Councilwoman Hiller. I would just hope that as we get ready to vote on this next week, that we do take into account the United Way continues to do a very good job. I think that they're very conscientious. They are open to tweaking what needs to be tweaked. They deliver good customer service. Again, I will just stress, I was not for this at the beginning. I came onto the council hard about wanting to usurp the whole process, but I just want to say it is doing a wonderful job. We've had to raise the dollar amount a little bit, which is, I think is still very much worth it, and I hope that we can vote to make that a possibility with them coming on board again next year. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Emerson?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to ask Councilwoman Hiller a question about leases. No, that's sorry. That was a joke. Sorry, bad joke. No, sorry. No, I just wanted to say, Councilwoman Hiller and Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala did the majority of the work on this. It was, I think as Councilman Dobler said a couple months ago about the fixing our culture, those ladies, they worked their butts off. So thank you guys for your work on this.
Thank you. And I do want to compliment the committee for doing their work, because I've served on that committee, and I know it can be a challenge. Everybody wants to start off trying to do the best they can, bump into questions, but I appreciate the work that you did on the committee. Thanks to all three. Councilmember Lesser.
Yeah, I too want to thank you, Karen and Christina, for all your hard work on this. And Christina, I was on that committee, and so I do remember. So you saying that makes me feel good, because I do know that we had some conversations about that, and that's where that is where I say this with utmost respect. Is there are two people in this world that I care about women. My wife and you two are the two people I do not want to get angry at. I learned that during that deal. So, but I'm glad it's working out with United Way. They do a great job. And Karen and Christina, thank you for working so hard on that. I know how much work you put on that.
Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
One thing I can admit is when I'm wrong. Thank you.
Mayor,
Where are you? Karen? Oh, okay. Councilwoman Hiller.
just for full disclosure, that contract was, I think, $21,000 this year. United Way asked for a significant increase. The city manager went ahead and negotiated that contract ahead of our recommendation to you. So you may want to disclose, I think it's going to be $40,000 next year, and he extended it for 3 years. So I think that's locked.
Okay, thank you, Councilwoman, for the additional information. Any questions? Councilmember Duncan.
I guess this is just a general question to the committee, because I also have heard nothing but good things about United Way. So this question is not specific to them, but is there a review process that we've gone through now that they're a couple of years in with the grantees as they apply, just to say, get their feedback on that process? Have we checked in with them, or do we plan to after? So, like I said, it really is more of a general question about what our process is there. It is not a question towards United Way.
Mayor, you want me to answer?
Councilwoman Hiller.
One of the things that we've worked hard at is to keep that process very open to the agencies. They are there at almost all of the meetings. They are welcome to comment on any of the process things as we go along. We end up using the appeal process, which some people didn't want to see in the committee, but works a number of ways. The new agencies that have kind of stumbled a little bit get a chance to stand up in front of everybody, including your peers, and express their concerns about how they got scored or how they got funded. Those are always, we listen carefully, so those could be lessons to us about places we might want to tweak. So that process allows that kind of thing. Anybody who felt like they weren't scored well has the right to stand up at the committee level and tell us why. One of the things we do, just for everybody's information, is to talk through that very respectfully, and that makes a big difference with them. United Way also so the agencies had a chance this fall to stand up and comment about any element of how that process went, and they were very favorable. Maybe Christina and Tony can help me, but I believe that either it was their idea or our request that United Way actually did sort of a customer service satisfaction survey at the end of the first run and shared that with us, and the reports were favorable.
Thank you, because I would be remiss to say it. I didn't point out that there's a few people, God bless them, who it's hard for them to say nice things about the city. And the feedback I have gotten from them is that this process has been much improved and that your committee has listened to them. And so that's partly why I asked the question, so people understood that we are listening and that they've begrudgingly said nice things about what's been going on over there. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we just always have to, as long as we continue to do that always, no matter who's on the committee, I think it will work fine.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, 4C, discussion of city manager recruitment process. I'm sorry, took it out of your head.
That's fine, Mayor.
Mayor, governing body, tonight we continue the conversation about the process for the permanent city manager. We have Director Russell, who is zooming in, who will be presenting some more information tonight.
Director Russell?
Good evening, everybody. I sent earlier yesterday the draft RFP scope of work. And really this evening, just wanted to kind of start our discussion there. And I don't know if you all have had a chance to review it or if you would prefer for me to kind of hit the highlights of the scope of work. I'm happy to do whatever your pleasure is there before discussing any possible revisions.
Jackie, if you would, as you suggest, hit the highlights, and then if the governing body has any questions, they can ask them of you when you're done.
Okay. So in the document, the first thing that I'd like to point out is based on last week's conversation under the Section 1 introduction. We have worked to add language there that discusses the preferred firms should have experience with public sector executive recruitment and placement and a proven track record for recruitment and placement of city managers in municipalities, preferably municipalities operating under a council manager form of government. Preference will be given to firms who can demonstrate an intimate familiarity with the Topeka community, economy, and current issues of significance for the city of Topeka municipal government. So that was a modification to what we've used previously from last week's discussion. And then if we turn to page 2, section 4, these are just standard criteria for the recruitment service categories. And I'm not going to read all of this, but the scope of work would include that the selected firm would complete marketing in working with the Human Resources Director, City Attorney, and the governing body to prepare the job description. And then they would be responsible for developing a recruitment flyer and brochure, and then implementing a recruitment plan to identify qualified candidates. They would source those candidates. They would go through an assessment of the candidates, and that would include also some preliminary reference checking and background checks to make sure that we are aware of anything in a person's background that may be of concern prior to determining them to be a final candidate. And then if we skip over to section 6 on page 3, the scope of work there, we have asked for the proposal submissions to include similar recruitment experience that the firm may have with other municipalities or comparable industries, qualifications, availability, and accessibility of personnel, knowledge of the city's form of government and the role of the city manager, the mayor, and the council, information that demonstrates familiarity with the Topeka community, economy, current issues of significance for the municipal government, and then also a proposed recruitment schedule. So those are the significant areas that I wanted to point out this evening that would be included in a scope of work for selecting a recruitment firm. And I would stand for any questions or discussion that you may have based on that information.
Okay, first I recognize Councilman Duncan.
I guess I throw this to you, Jackie, but really it's, I guess, sort of my colleagues. I'm stuck in the introduction part on one sentence. We do the preferred firm should have experience with public sector executive recruitment and placement. Good there. And a proven track record for recruitment and placement of city managers in municipalities, preferably municipalities operating under a council manager form of government. I'm not sure how many local firms would have that very specific experience. And I mean, I feel like if we find someone who's a good recruiter, whether they've actually ever placed a city manager isn't as important to me as they're good at recognizing that talent, understanding what our needs are, and have some experience. Because I think if we're trying to stay local, we're sort of creating an impossible task. We want local, but someone who, that's just not what a lot of local firms are going to specialize in, that very specific role. So I don't know. I don't know. I guess I would strike that, or at least discuss what everyone else's thoughts on that are.
Councilman Dobler.
Thank you, Mayor. I was looking at the same sentence and had exactly the same thoughts. I like, when you get to the proposal format, it's better, there's better wording there. In similar experiences in other municipalities or comparable industries, that kind of opens it up. Knowledge of the city's form of government, anybody can have that, I think. So I would tend to agree. I think that maybe the first part of that sentence is okay, but the last part really should come out. I mean, here's an opportunity. If we have local firms that are really good at recruitment, but they've never recruited a city manager, here's an opportunity to give them, allow them to put that on their resume, as opposed to prohibiting them from actually being able to be a part of it. So I would agree 100%. And I did have one other question for Jackie, if I could, Mayor.
Yes.
The very last section 8 there, contract term, seems to intimate here that we're hiring a firm for maybe 3 years to do other executive level searches. Is that correct?
This is modeled off of what we have done the previous 2 times when we have selected a recruitment firm for city manager executive searches, and yes, it is. And we opted to leave that in, just not knowing if there would be any other executive searches that the body may want to utilize a firm for in the near future, but certainly that is something that could be modified with this scope of work if the decision is made for it to be only for the city manager search.
I don't really have feelings either way. I just wanted to make sure that I was seeing what it actually said. So, thank you.
Councilman Lesser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I promise, especially since I'm Zoom and they're both there, Jackie, I've not talked to those two. First off, I hope you're feeling better.
I am, thank you.
Good. But I share the same sentiment with that. Having that portion of it removed for the same reasons, and I would love for it to be, a firm that's going to bring in some of, as we talked in the past, candidates that have been city managers somewhere else, currently are somewhere else. But I also am hoping this council gets to get some applications. I know that I can say these guys' names because I know none of them will take it or do it, but, I'd love to have the opportunity that we got somebody like a Matt Pravarnik or a Cody Foster, a Klossman, a Bull, somebody like that is a proven business leader as well that is in the mix, somebody like that. So I don't want to narrow us down to just, somebody who's an existing city manager. We've kind of done that. So I promise I didn't talk to him before this, and I'm at my office, so I share the same thing. I don't necessarily want that sentence in there. That's all I had.
Thank you. Councilman Capp.
I kind of agree with those sentiments. I think if we get too specific, we eliminate even options for local. So as long as we kind of leave it a little bit more broad on the specifications, we can actually attract more and then be able to weed those out through there, rather than saying, if you don't meet these exact requirements, you're not even in the ballpark.
Further comments or questions, suggestions? Oh, Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess, Ms. Russell, you'd sent us a thing about the position description. That's not a part of this, though, correct?
The position description would be provided with the scope of work, just to give them an idea of what we are recruiting for. But part of what we would be hiring the firm to do would be to help with finalizing the position description or providing input into the position description as you all determine any revisions that may be necessary. So that is part of what the services that we would ask them to provide for us.
Okay, great. Yeah, as you know, I sent you, or there's a thing, and I did really like the revision you made. I don't know how my colleagues feel about that. I think you shared it with them as well, but I really liked your
I did not, but we could certainly switch over to that if I've received the feedback on the RFP, and unless there's more discussion on that first.
Guess I'll leave that up to the mayor.
Director, can you give me an idea with the comments that are made and suggestions, what the next steps are? How soon do you think that we can put this out and start that search for the company?
I could certainly make those modifications and start working with procurement tomorrow. I think it's very feasible that we would have the RFP out to solicit responses this week still. Typically, we would leave it open for 21 days. I could work with Director Bowling on whether or not we could shorten that time frame for this purpose. But then the review of responses, I would say within the next 4 weeks, or by the, let's see, looking at the calendar real quick, we could probably plan to be reviewing responses no later than the second meeting in February, and selecting a firm.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or discussion? Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you. Jackie, I know before, and I don't know what time before, because I've been on this rodeo a couple of times, that it was a guarantee, like if we got candidates in and we didn't find any that were suitable, that firm would help us until we found some. Is that in this provision?
That would not typically be in the scope of work for soliciting the bids and responses, but that would be a component of the actual agreement with the selected firm. That would typically be where that guarantee language would appear.
Okay, okay. I guess I was just looking in the wrong place then. I apologize. Thank you.
Anything further on this topic?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Nager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I almost called you Madam Mayor, so we're even.
I've done that before. I still do call him that sometimes.
I mean, a term of endearment. So, Director, with everything that we are talking about tonight, we are really talking about figuring out the firm that we want to work with to help us hire the city manager. And everything that we're putting into the language right now is to allow them to kind of have that rough idea of what we are wanting as a city manager. If there's anything that, how much, we have this for a non-action item next week to further discuss this. If we have any concerns or anything, we can still review this and send you emails, and we'll go ahead and discuss it again next week. Am I reading that correctly?
I think that that's a placeholder, and it's really, absolutely, if you all want to have more time to review and come back, I can kind of make the modifications to the scope of work that have been discussed this evening and send that out, and then let you all review it between now and next week. And then next week, we can come back and see if there's any other final tweaks. And then we would just put the bid out once you all are comfortable with everything.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification. I'm very excited to get started on this because I know that it's really important for our city to have that constant direction. And thank you for doing this work to get us all ready for that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. If I may, I think it would be a good idea for myself and legal and the interim city manager to visit over these ideas and suggestions before we actually put out that RFP or bring it in its final form before we vote on it. So we'll make that arrangement if you would, city manager, along with legal, so we can take a look at that before we bring it out. Hopefully work out all the kinks in it. Thank you. No further discussion on this item. We'll move to non-action item 4D, if the clerk would read.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilwoman.
Outcome based.
Erin had her hand up.
Pardon?
We got one more on outcome based.
Councilwoman Hiller, did you have your hand up?
I did.
Okay, I'm sorry. Please.
Oh, wow. I just, on that issue, wanted to ask Jackie one more time. I know this came up last week, but could you talk a little bit about how proprietary the information is in recruiting search agencies about people who are looking for jobs like our city manager jobs? And from your experience and how, if you could talk a little more than you did last week about how hard it might be for a local, any agency that has not done city manager search work to kind of break into that network.
I think that there's various challenges. City managers that are current city managers may be looking for new opportunities, but they want to do that very confidentially. So typically they may have an established relationship with an executive search firm that their niche is placing city managers. And then through that network, those recruit firms can make those managers aware of opportunities in other cities and that they feel may be a fit for them. So I do think that that could be a challenge for a firm that does not have a niche in city manager recruitment of reaching and tapping into current city managers. However, I think that if you're sourcing with some of the, posting the job with like a strategic government resources or an International City Managers Association, then you're going to reach still a majority of them just because they are going to be paying attention in those circles as well for opportunities on their own. But that is that the direct networking would not be established typically for a firm that is not in the niche of city manager recruitment.
Thank you. If that's the case, maybe there could be a question in the RFP for the consulting firm, asking them if they are not usually working in that field, what connections they have and what plans they would have to be able to optimize their reach. It's just a thought. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay. Now you can see the full screen, no hands up. Good. All right. We'll move on to item 4D, if the clerk could read.
Item D is a discussion regarding outcome-based budgeting for the city of Topeka.
City Manager?
Mayor, governing body, tonight we'll present some information on the outcome budgeting process that we have been working on. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Director Wade.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, governing body. Tonight I'm joined by Adam Vaughn, one of our senior financial analysts, and via Zoom by Patty Gentrup, the consulting services manager with the KU Public Management Center. We're here to talk about an exciting opportunity to involve the public with our next round of operational and CIP budgeting. Patty, are you with us?
I am. Good evening. All right, great. Thank you so much. Anything else, Steve, or ready to go?
It's all yours.
All right, thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Nice to be here with you this evening. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the community priority setting that hopefully will set a good foundation as you enter into your budget processes for this coming year. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So basically, I just want to first of all give you an introduction, not only of myself, but of the Public Management Center. Then I will discuss with you the process that we anticipate undertaking with you and for you over the next couple of months, the schedule, and then certainly I'm open to any questions that you might have related to that. So in terms of the Public Management Center, and you can go to the next slide, thank you. In terms of the Public Management Center, we are housed within the KU School of Public Affairs and Administration. And our primary book of work is leadership development for public sector and nonprofit staff across the state of Kansas, and occasionally across the line into the state of Missouri. And we really do that work so that to build community, so that communities can best be served by the public servants who work on your behalf. I've been with the Public Management Center for about 4 years, and I began my career in direct service to cities, and I would date myself with telling you how many years, but it's been about half in direct service for cities, and then about half as a consultant. As part of the Public Management Center, I do a lot of strategic planning and facilitation for communities, organizations, and governing bodies. And also do some instruction in our leadership courses. And so I was really pleased when Mr. Wade got in touch with me to talk about this exciting opportunity that you all have in engaging your citizens and what their priorities are for the coming years. So let's just talk a little bit about the process then. That we anticipate undertaking in the next couple of months. So as you well know, there have been 5 strategic priorities that have been established by the governing body as you look ahead to how to allocate your resources to meet your community goals. And they're listed here on the screen. As part of those priorities, you also identified kind of some objectives. They were pretty broad objectives in terms of and the language that was used in the resolution to approve these priorities was including but not limited to. And it's my understanding that you want to get a little bit more specific in terms of what that priority might look like based upon community input. So what we anticipate doing then is having stakeholder engagement that would begin at the end of this month. And if you could please advance the slide, that would be great. So as part of first of all, what are the objectives? Why are we getting folks together, right? I mean, we want to make sure that we understand what the goals are before we invite people in to hear what they have to say and what their priorities might be. So first of all, for each of those priority areas, we want to understand what success looks like for the community, because what strong neighborhoods is to me, or what infrastructure might be to you, they might be completely different things. And so we want to understand what your constituents think success looks like in each of those areas. Then we will be identifying specific goals and objectives and really going through a prioritization process. We'll do this over the course of 6 workshops. So the first 5 workshops will be priority specific. Okay, so, and we will be inviting 25 people to participate in each of those workshops. This will be a mix of you as elected officials, your staff, as well as constituents. And so everybody will be, I guess, on a level playing field, I guess is what I'll say, in that room. We've structured it so that everybody has a voice and you're really interacting with your constituents. The final workshop then would bring all 125 folks together, and so that they both can review the work of their fellow community members, as well as kind of have some input into the final recommendations that would be made to the governing body. What those workshops look like then, if you could please advance the slide, that'd be great, thanks. Is first of all, we really want to set the stage, and we would do that in three specific areas. First of all, kind of a welcome and introduction, and it would be, while there'll be 25 people in the room, we want to make sure that we are everybody has an opportunity to say who they are, and why they're there, and what they're looking forward to as part of the process. We'd of course give them an overview of the process so they can have a solid understanding of the engagement. But then we really want to make sure that we have a strong, we provide an understanding of what each of those priority areas are. So city staff has been working on an environmental scan document that will have kind of an overview of the process and kind of set the stage in terms of where tax dollars go to, what the population growth has been, what the budget looks like, not just this year, but kind of looking ahead for the next 5 years. That'll kind of be the overview for each of the priority areas. And then specifically, we will go into some of the work that has already been done by the community in those priority areas, what some of the emerging issues are, and what the performance measures are. So that people might have an idea of what happens when it comes to neighborhood improvement and enhancement, but they will really have then more specific information. As I mentioned earlier, then we'll be asking them, first of all, then now that you kind of understand a little bit, hopefully are more familiar with where the community has been, where do we want to go? And so that's really kind of envisioning the future and helping, asking them to help you all determine what success looks like in each of the 5 areas. Consider what the possibilities are then. What are the specific goals that would help us reach that success? And then establish priorities. In terms of the schedule, we understand that this really needs to be done by the end of this first quarter. And so you'll see here that the dates have been established for each of the workshops. We are planning right now that they would be in person. However, we are prepared to do that virtually as well. And so Mr. Wade can speak to that, I think, if you have got questions about it. But I'm prepared to do it either way. 2 years ago, I would have said, absolutely not. There's no way you can have 25 or 125 people on Zoom and have an effective meeting. I'm here to tell you it can be done, it can be effective, and it can be fun, even on Zoom. I prefer to be with people, but certainly the pandemic kind of dictates what we're able to do. So I know that was a fairly quick overview of the process, but I am happy to answer any questions about the process and how we might be proceeding.
Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you tell me how long y'all have been engaging in this outcome-based budgeting?
So certainly, so we won't be actually participating in actually the budget piece of it. So the actual identification of the resources and the funding mechanisms and how you'll be putting the budget together. This work is intended to identify where those priorities, community priorities are, so that you can use that as you put the budget together.
Well, I guess, I mean, maybe I need to clarify the question a little bit. I know you're not going to be involved in it at that level, but the concept in sharing it with localities, with local governments, I don't know if you do, you know, I doubt if you do state government, but local governments, how long have you been offering this type?
Yeah, so I personally have been doing this kind of work for about 15 years. And so it's not every time does a community organization say we're going to use it specifically for outcome-based budgeting, but it is about setting the priorities and then how they use that in determining their resource allocations.
So with the outcome-based budgeting involving the community, what benefits have you seen that it provides?
Well, I think that it provides an opportunity for the governing body to hear from their constituents. I know that is something that all, frankly, governing bodies, organizations grapple with. Is like, how do we get people to the table? How do we really understand what their priorities are? And so this is a way to do that. I think it's really important, though, that we make sure, not only in this particular instance, but anytime you're engaging in communities, that they understand how that information is going to be used. And so we'll have to be very clear about that as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
Councilman Kell.
Thank you, Mayor. If I remember right from our training we had on this, it's more of just the stakeholders get to kind of almost rank the projects, and then the department heads kind of look at that and go from there. Is that how it's kind of worked out?
So the stakeholders will have identified their priorities. So yes, in terms of ranking, I will have to defer to your staff in terms of exactly how that would be used in the actual budgeting process.
Yeah, so Councilman, there's a couple of different processes here. One is the actual rankings will take place by an independent team. So this session will allow to happen is for the public to get involved and say what they feel is our priorities. So we'll take that input and then we'll rank proposals for the budget to bring back to you. If that answers your question.
Councilman Dobler.
Thank you, Mayor. What's the makeup of each one of the, I know you've asked the council to pick a person from their district, but you're talking about 25 times, what, five sessions? Who are the other 24 in that?
So there's, each of the 10 of you have an opportunity to appoint one individual for each of the 5 sessions. There are 5 at-large community members. We have an opportunity for GTP to have somebody on there. We're looking for somebody from Forge or a similar group to get involved for a younger viewpoint. NIA has an opportunity for a spot. And then staff and governing body.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Councilman Duncan.
Thank you. A couple things. In general, I know there was staff came and talked to our committee, policy and finance at one point, just as we didn't have this quite a presentation, but it was hey, what do you think of this? And early sounding board, and that was Councilmembers Nager and Emerson and myself, and we asked some questions, but I think in general, we think this is at least worth trying. We hope it'll provide us some additional information moving forward in this process, but it's obviously new to folks. I wish I'd had this presentation before you asked us to go out into the community, because I think it clarified some stuff for us tonight, because the truth is, I say this have to, I mean, I had a lot of people turn me down because part of it was I couldn't clarify. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm still confused. Are these in person or Zoom meetings? And that was a simple question. I tried, people want to know with COVID, and so they said, well, I'm not doing it if it's, so with respect, I know you wanted these names by last Friday, but this is the first time I even feel like I actually now have a better understanding of what I'm asking of people to commit to.
Understood. Then I guess the one positive out of it, Councilman, is with the first session being January 25th, we'd like to get that one buttoned up pretty quick. With the last session being late February, early March, we have a little bit of an opportunity for some nominees. But I do get your point.
So is that first meeting in person or on Zoom?
At this point in time, we are hoping for in person, but we're watching the COVID numbers very closely, and we'll have to make a decision probably by the end of next week.
I guess what I'm telling you is I have people who that will determine whether they participate. So if you want some of us to get some of those people, just so you know, we kind of need to know, because for some people that's a, if it's in person, they may not participate if it's versus whatever. So I'm just letting you know that's a barrier right now if I can't answer that question.
Understood.
So if we could figure that out sooner, that'd be great.
Yes, sir.
My last thing is I just want to clarify through this process, since it's new, we've used a priority process as a council various ways since I've been on here to kind of get to this point early March. I'm assuming, or I guess I want to let the public know, this is not replace then some of our other processes of budget hearings and public comment and allowing them to also continue that. It isn't, hey, we did these forums back in January, February, close. And I know that's not the intent, but I just want the public to know that this is an enhancement to that process, not a replacement per se for that process.
It's an additional opportunity as opposed to a replacement.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and thank you. This really helps tonight because I kind of had those same questions about the number of meetings and how many people you needed each of us to suggest. I guess my question is, you want each of us to come to each of the meetings, is that correct?
We're looking for a couple of council members at each session, not for you to attend each one of them. Okay. I have had one council member ask about attending multiples. That's very possible. 25 individuals will have active participation. So if you're number 26 or number 27, you can watch, you can absorb and listen, and we expect that. But it's 3 council members per session.
Okay. And I guess my question is, first of all, I really like that we're trying this out. I'm a big advocate for this and trying something different. But to the extent that we're doing this to get the citizens involved, I sometimes feel when we show up to things, we have a chilling effect on other people speaking up. So how do they, I know the young lady who was on here said that everybody be on a playing field, and I love that. I wish we could wear disguises and go in, because people tell us what they really think instead of maybe what they think we want them to say. So how do you do that?
I think part of the hope, Councilman, with having governing body members present, is there may be some questions that come from the participants that you're honestly best able to answer. And so your level of expertise, we think will be a benefit as opposed to a chilling effect.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilwoman Hiller first.
Thank you, Mayor. I worked on my selections last week, and that raised some issues for me that I hadn't expected. So, for instance, I represent neighborhoods, a lot of neighborhoods. And so the first thought would be, if I'm a neighborhood person, I probably want to be on the neighborhood group. But what I realized, for instance, is that a substantial amount of money that they compete for is from the infrastructure budget. Also, community policing is very important to them. So how do you, I won't say arbitrarily, but you've already picked a button. So many of the issues that I deal with, and I kept going with that, cross over from bucket to bucket. how do you allow either everybody to end up with the same list or to focus and kind of draw boundaries around what they talk about?
That's a great question. Thank you so much for that. So these are, we're not starting from zero here because the council has already identified their priorities, right? And so the challenge will be when community members come, like they won't just have tunnel vision, right? You don't come as a community member and just have tunnel vision about, to your point, just about neighborhoods or just about infrastructure or just about public safety, because it all works together, right? So you have to give them some parameters while at the same time not completely limiting them. And there's always, even if you have 125 people involved in a process from the get-go in the same room, in the same conversation, there's always crossover, right? There's always going to be. And so it will be important that last meeting when all 125 people come together for us to, and I will tell you, I don't have a draft agenda for that meeting. I've started the draft agenda for this first 5, and that they're going to be similar because I think we need to see how that plays out and how we make sure that we understand what the discussions were at each of the 5 different meetings, how they work together to build the Topeka that everybody wants. So I guess Councilmember Hiller, I recognize what you're saying. I do understand, and it is more of an art than a science. And so we'll have to be cognizant of that.
Well, and I don't want to put the wrong people on the wrong, because I had a bunch of angry people who, of course, all wanted to serve and got told there was one spot in District 1. I started working with them. And for instance, we've been working on a program called Dreams right now. And the idea is not to have all the city's money in one place and be available once every 20 years, but instead it includes consults with the idea of getting the neighborhood folks over to Public Works and Utilities and identifying what they think is important and finding out where it is in the CIP. So it's not even just theoretical. It's, we're really actually working hard to do that crossover. Because of course infrastructure is streets and sidewalks and underground utilities that are all happening in every neighborhood in town. So I just wanted to make sure they were in the right place.
Yeah.
I have a second question then, and if I may, Mayor.
Yes.
And you did start with these 5, and they were last year's council's budget goals. But we also have a strategic plan. And part of what we talked about when we did the master strategic plan was that the way that process went was that the council was identifying what they wanted for the city, not necessarily what staff would do or what the budget would be or whether it would cost any money. What are our goals for the city? And then we identified action steps based on those. And so one of the things you see is that often people only talk about the things that cost money, or they end up dwelling on the things that cost a lot of money instead of the things, we're pretty good at talking about small amounts of money, right? So we as council, we can focus on small amounts of money. But I just wondered how you guide those conversations to keep them broad, or if you do.
So I always use this example, right? If I were talking with the governing body, I would say, what you've done is right on target in terms of where your priorities are, right? It's about having, and I apologize, I don't have, investing in infrastructures. That's pretty broad, right? And then I would say to the governing body, so talk about your transportation system, not the pothole that needs to be fixed, right? And so we want the residents to be somewhere between the transportation system and the pothole, right? And so I can imagine that, and I apologize because I of course don't know all of the issues in Topeka, but I can imagine where there's going to be a category of infrastructure projects where you're going to get a lot of energy around, or here's maybe some new ideas in terms of what we need to be doing and investing in our neighborhoods. And then those are still going to be somewhere between pothole and transportation system. And then it will be incumbent upon the staff to work with the governing body in terms of budgeting, okay, where are the priorities within those? So that's kind of some of the language I tend to use.
Thank you.
Hope I answered your question.
Councilman Duncan, do you have a question? No. Okay. Any further questions? You see any hands up? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Director Wade. Okay, that's the completion of our non-action items. We have one person signed up for public comment. It's a surprise guest. Mr. Ledbetter?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lesser. I want to just continue some of my comments from last week. I didn't get completely scrolled down into some of the reforms that I would dearly love to see happen before we have another manager made permanent. I did talk about changing the ordinance. You're aware of this. I've talked about this many times about making sure that the council approves every contract, 50,000 and over. But down in some of the council rules, and I found out one of these needs to be changed by ordinance, I would really like the city council to set its own agenda. And I feel like if we don't, what we've got is, and I'm not picking on personalities, but we have a manager basically dictating to the board of directors what he's going to listen to and what the public's going to be entitled to listen to and what discussions we can have. And I think it was a poorly drafted charter ordinance in the first place. When I argued many years ago for this form of government, I never envisioned that we'd have, instead of a strong mayor, a strong manager and a weak council. I never envisioned that. I always wanted the council to be stronger and kind of be that balance. Now, you have to have a CEO in charge, and they need to be held accountable for the work being done, the money being spent. There's a fiduciary duty that that person needs to follow, actually understand contracts they're signing, things like that. But the council needs to also oversee that. And so it's a team effort, but it's done to protect the public's money and the public's interest. Now, other things that I would like to see is that when we have presentations, that the public, if they so desire, would be able to comment on those, because we're actually forming public policy. So if we have presentations that are just done by some outside consultant, I'm not talking about this last one, but I've seen many of these, and it's like whatever's in their head between their left ear and their right ear is what the new policy is going to be. The public has no say-so. Or whatever that manager deems in that presentation, the public has no comments or no right to comment. What I want to see is more involvement of the public in all these processes. And I think the council's open to that, but we've had managers, especially recently, that absolutely did not want to hear the public. You knew that because we were not allowed to speak. And even if we did, it seemed like there was no response. Well, I see them writing on a piece of paper, but I never actually got an actual response by action that the ideas were taken seriously and that we were actually going to correct problems and actually fix problems, fix things, which is a big part of government. A big part of government is not just representing the people, but actually fixing problems. The people come to you with problems. They come to you with problems because they want you to fix them. or they have an idea on how to fix them, but they need you to act on it and listen and work it into a budget or work it into a process, a policy change, something that shows them that the government actually listened and actually responded in a good manner and actually took them seriously. So these are just some of my suggestions. I've emailed them to you already, so I don't need to belabor this, but the email was sent out last week. If you need another one, I can send it to you. My time is, wow, it keeps adding time. Okay, well, anyway. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Ledbetter. I don't see anyone else signed up for public comment.
No, Mayor.
We'll move on to announcements then, City Clerk.
The January 18th preliminary agenda consists of one board appointment, 4 presentations, the Troy Scroggins Awards. Consent agenda are routine items. Action items include ordinance for the general obligation bonds, Series 2022A, a resolution for general obligation bonds, Series 2022A, election of the deputy mayor, and election for the Joint Economic Development Organization Board, JEDO Board, election for the MPPO Policy Board, excuse me, and next item is to rescind resolution number 9270, the downtown parking meters, 100 blocks of Kansas Avenue. Approval of Social Service Grants Committee Report and Recommendations 2023. Next is a resolution for approval of the citywide half-cent sales tax project for 2022. And non-action items include discussion, Topeka Landmarks Commission, 333 Southwest Greenwood Avenue fence appeal. Second discussion item is downtown zoning related text amendments. Third discussion item is the downtown rezoning. And again, we will be discussing the city manager recruitment process. And that completes the preliminary agenda for January 18th.
Thank you. City manager?
2 announcements. First, everybody's aware we have the ARPA meeting Saturday, 9 to 1, Holiday Building. And then the following Monday, city offices will be closed in observance for Martin Luther King Day.
Mr. Duncan?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to point out tonight that Councilmember Emerson said, and I quote, "I'm a pilot, not a good pilot, but a pilot." So my public service announcement for the evening is, if you've got any rides scheduled with Councilmember Emerson's plane anytime soon, you know, I'm just going to point that out. Two things. First, I want to thank the Public Works Director. As he will tell you, my emails come in waves. He won't hear from me for like a week or two, and then all of a sudden, and then it's already Tuesday, and he's gotten a few from me. But he and his staff have been very responsive, and we're accomplishing a few things that some citizens had questions about. So I just want to thank him for putting up with this week's wave to this point, and it's only Tuesday. The second one goes out to, look, we got water breaks. We all know we got water breaks. There's a lot of water breaks. There's a lot of reasons for those water breaks, ranging from this weather to just age to other issues. But the real heroes of those water breaks are all the city staff who, if you saw even on the news as it's freezing cold and they're down in the water and cutting the pipes and repairing those things despite the temperatures. So just thank you to all of them for getting out there, and from the reports we've gotten, those are being repaired fairly quickly and efficiently. So thank you to all the city staff who's on top of that in this weather. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Lesser?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll echo Spencer's comments on the water breaks. Thank you to the water department workers who are in the cold, in the wet, late at night sometimes. for doing that. Much appreciative. You know, the only thing that we've had almost as many of lately compared to water line breaks is fires. And as Sylvia says, get your smoke detectors, make sure you had them. And as Spencer alluded to, we lost a young man this morning or the other morning, and much respect to our firefighters that in the cold or trudging out to the multiple fires we have. The other thing I want to touch on in District 9, I'm not going to get too deep into this because I cannot. But what I do want to say is Landon Middle School is in my district, District 9 off Fairlawn. And this is a situation where everything was done right, from the students to the principal to the SRO to law enforcement, and we avoided a real situation that could have put us on the CBS Evening News. And so real deal here in Topeka, Kansas. And I have reached out to touch base to thank those individuals at some point. I hope I get an opportunity to do so. But the courage of some young people, and then the diligence of 501 staff and law enforcement has avoided a situation that this wasn't a situation that might have happened. This was going to happen, period. And we're having a much different meeting tonight had there not been the courage of those young people following what they've been taught, trained, stepping forward, saying what they saw, and not being afraid to what the consequences were of whatnot. So I applaud them, and hopefully, maybe in the future we can, when people are ready, we can recognize them. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a precaution to everyone, I suppose it's the first, since I've gotten sick for the first time in all this mess, it has really heightened my consciousness of just how these numbers are running with COVID, and obviously there are flus and viruses running at the same time. I don't have COVID, but I have all the symptoms that the Omicron virus has, and it's been hard, and just hope everybody will continue to wear their masks, keep their distance, go out when you need to, but be careful when you do. And we're going to have maybe even more patience than we did before about issues of virtual versus live changing in the last minute. That's just the way it goes. And appreciate all the hard work and the role modeling that people have done. Otherwise, I want to reiterate the Chief's note that Monday is Martin Luther King holiday. Give a shout out to the Living the Dream folks. They are still carrying that banner. Because of COVID, the banquet is pushed off until May. I encourage everybody to watch Facebook and other places where the information is coming out and around about what events and recognitions are going on, whether they're live or virtual, and participating. It's a really important day, and one that's important to us here. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. Wanted to just say to the family of Alexander Cervantes, he's now a little angel, I would imagine. Blessings to them, and as the grandmother heals in the hospital, I hope she makes it through. It was just so utterly tragic to hear about that happening. Also wanted to extend condolences for the loss of a very vital community member at Our Lady of Guadalupe, Mr. Mark Torres. His family has deep, deep roots in Oakland, and found out about his passing today. He's a relatively young man, and it's just a terrible, terrible loss, and wanted to just give condolences. Also, I want to thank staff this past week for meeting with me about what I believe is a crisis here in Topeka. We're not talking about anywhere else but Topeka, about the chronic, unsheltered, homeless population. I also met last week with Barry Feeker for a couple of hours, and I want to thank him for taking the time to meet. In both of these meetings, of course, there's not going to be any easy or quick resolution because this is a nuanced, complex, and very challenging road that we are on as a city. Topeka as a whole is being impacted by the chronic unsheltered population. Yet I will be very blunt in that District 2, particularly North Topeka and Oakland, have continued to bear the brunt of the unsheltered chronic homeless population because, as we all know, the Topeka Rescue Mission is located in District 2. The unsheltered often stay in close proximity because of the wraparound services that are offered. But District 2 residents have grown tired, frustrated, and cynical that anything will be done to alleviate squatting fires in vacant homes, the petty theft from their front and backyards, the knocks on their doors during the night, during the day, and the public health and safety concerns with the encampments on the river. I have heard from City of Topeka staff for the first time in open meetings that the unsheltered chronic homeless population, which again is a very small percentage of the population that we have in Topeka, many of them are on that road to recovery and wholeness with their families. But the challenge is, I have heard come from City of Topeka staff about the chronic homeless, unsheltered, has also led me to have meetings where I have heard that there has been an increase over the last 5 years. Last year was the highest year for fires in District 2 in North Topeka. I've heard Topeka police officers say that they don't have a handle on the crisis happening. And yes, I know it's happening all over the country. But the residents here in District 2, and by extension other districts that are being impacted, but District 2 being a low to moderate income and hard-working neighborhood, still trying to eke out a living, are not interested in what is going on at a national level. They want to know what the answers are and viable solutions. Yes, the chronic unsheltered homeless should be treated with dignity and even be part of developing answers. Yet I am here tonight to say it is not a community-driven approach to expect one district, an LMI hardworking district, to deal with this crisis without knowing they are being heard, that their needs and vision for their communities and future are just as relevant. We talk about economic development. We talk about increasing population in Topeka. We talk about this true game-changing initiative of changing our culture of property maintenance. But if we don't deal with this crisis in a manner that makes sense to the citizens that are having to live through it as well, then all of this is going to be for naught. because certain realms of our community are still being unheard. And I would say one more thing. Shame on the Kansas legislature for not passing Medicaid expansion, for making this problem so much worse. Topeka and other cities and towns across Kansas are having this problem as well, this challenge. And it could be made so much, I'm not saying easier, but maybe a little less intense and crisis feeling if Medicaid expansion were in place. But as long as it does not touch any of us directly, as long as it is not directly in our backyard, oftentimes we can turn away from it. And I just want to say I'm going to bring this up at ARPA meetings. I'm going to bring this up during the budget. Community folks are ready to come up and talk about this. And I'm ready and willing to have any kind of conversations to help bring viable answers to the table that will turn into action. Thank you.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to challenge my colleagues. I know it's COVID time right now, and every fire that we get, the first thing I do is I look to see if there was working smoke detectors. And if you look on all the ones that we've received, there's no working smoke detectors. We have to do this together. We have to do this together. We got to continue to spread the word to save lives. That was just so heart-wrenching, you know, to hear a firefighter that carried that young man out, that found him. He couldn't carry him out, but his partner had to carry him out because it hit home. It hit home really, really hard. It's saddened to me that we just can't give, they're free and we just can't even give them out. And we've got to do a better job of that. We've got to come up with a plan. And so, again, I hope to light some fires so that you'll be like Spencer and hear my voice and put up as many as you think you need. I won't say how many. But this is just a thought that we can help in one way. We've got to continue to keep that in our conversation. And that's what I'm challenging my colleagues to do. That's what I'm begging you and I'm asking you to do, is to reach out to your neighborhood, reach out to the people that you love, reach out to Topeka, and let's get these smoke detectors going to not only help our public servants, our safety, public servants, our safety officers, our everybody. They're free. They're free. They're 10 years and they're free. And every one of those notices that you get, I go straight to the bottom. And it just really, really, it hurts. Smoke detectors work. I've had a fire. They work. They work. I can't express that. And as much as I continue to preach this, I had a family member that had a fire and didn't have a smoke detector. So not only do we have to hear it, we have to do it. Let's do it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brett Kell, if you don't have a fire, if you don't have any smoke detectors, I will get you an application. I get all the new members an application to get one put in. So if you don't have one, an application is on your way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, tough thing to follow. That was tragedy. I mean, I can't imagine. I also want to echo what Councilmember Duncan and Lesser said about our water and fire personnel this week. I mean, obviously this terrible thing happened, and the same with water. Those guys are out there. I think Mr. Copley said, there were 27 breaks, major breaks this week. And, yeah, so I know it's, you know, people are frustrated because streets are shut down and stuff. And trust me, they're not shut down because we want them to be, or because the people aren't working as quick as they can. But remember, when we talk about ARPA funding this weekend, this is something we need to get a handle on, because we can't afford to do this every time it gets cold. Secondly, I would like to ask the city manager to get Mr. Johnson's schedule back in a month or so. Again, not trying to be a jerk, but we have, I just feel a sense of urgency. We got to start doing this. We got to start growing. And if it takes me saying every week, I guess that's what it will take. Hopefully you guys get tired of hearing that. And lastly, just I guess on a personal note, I want to congratulate a native Topekan and my daughter, Lieutenant Katie Duval, on being named the Junior Officer of the Year at Scott Air Force Base over in Illinois. So congratulations, Katie.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Kell.
Mainly, I'm going to kind of piggyback on what's already kind of been said. Like Councilwoman Ortiz said, you know, please get smoke detectors. And if you're not sure on how to install them, reach out to people to have them get installed. Because some people just don't want to get them because they don't know how to install them. And I know plenty of people, and I may even come over and do it myself if you ask me and I have the time. And same with the battery checks. Make sure, you know, just don't get the smoke detector. Make sure you're checking your batteries. And I know a good time frame on that is like every daylight saving time, the switch. So that gives you twice a year where you can test your batteries. The other thing I'd like to talk about is what happened at Landon Middle School and how it was handled, and the great job that the teachers do, because I know with my wife being a teacher, I know the number one priority of teachers is to make the school the safest place for those kids. And they try to do everything they can for it. Thank you to the Public Works. As my father was a plumber, I dealt with him several times, missing my events as growing up because he would have to go, you know, fix a busted water main or take care of someone's house that had a busted pipe. And I know it's growing up and having to go out and work with them. It's very rough in those temperatures to be out there and dealing with water. And then finally, we had some gentlemen come to Topeka this past week, and what they're called is auditors. And I felt like these gentlemen were very antagonistic, and our officers that they dealt with had great composure, great professionalism, and working great to de-escalate situations when they had encountered them. There's 4 videos out there because they went to the State House, they came here to this building, post office, and I can't remember, but all 4 videos, the officers did a great job, and I made sure the chief of police knew, and the officers here in the building that I got to actually see, I made sure to point out to them that what a great job they did with some people that I felt like just wanted to get the officers in a gotcha moment.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Nager.
Thank you, Mayor. I also want to express my absolute gratitude towards the faculty and staff at Landon Middle School and the student body, and towards the men and women who are out working on the streets for the city of Topeka to make sure that we are getting our utilities, that we are staying safe. People have been saying it repeatedly. This is where you can go to apply for a free smoke detector. It is services.topeka.org, and you can apply for a smoke alarm. There is an online form, and it is for renters, it is for owners. If you need to have a hearing impaired alarm, you can get it there too. If you need to have if you are a Spanish speaking applicant, I'm sorry, I cannot express this in Spanish, but you can get that done. So again, services.topeka.org. Please stay safe. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Dobrik.
Thank you, Mayor. Very quickly, piggybacking on what's already been said, I want to point out my district is probably the hilliest in town. When we have an event like we had last week, it ends up being a lot of ice and places that thaw and refreeze, and sometimes they're slicker a couple days later than they were when the event happened. Our public works staff has been extremely responsive. I've had a number of constituents call and ask about particular hills where, frankly, cars and buses are having a hard time getting up or down. And kudos to Tony and his crew. They are out there, Tony Trower, and Public Works in street. They are out there. They get those situations rectified almost before I hang up the phone. It's kind of an old term, hang up the phone, but you get it. All right. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman. Finally, I'd like to offer the same sentiments that have been expressed. I know I don't want to sound repetitive, but it's important for us to acknowledge the good work of our city employees. Oftentimes they take a rap when things don't get done, so it's good to acknowledge them when they're out there doing their job in some of the worst conditions. So I want to add my congratulations to the effectiveness of the management and to the dedication of the guys out there who are actually doing it. I know in front of my house, I saw that truck, those trucks going back and forth, way more than I ever had in the past. So I think the reorganization that they've done to address our problems is really working out. Again, it is a sad thing about the fire, death, fatality coming to our community because everyone feels it. And the situation in Landon, believe me, I took real notice because I had the opportunity to be principal for a day out there. One of my grandsons go out there, and as soon as I heard that, that concern level jumped way high. So I applaud the students who stepped forward, the parents who took them seriously, teachers who took action, and the law enforcement that intervened on behalf of the entire community, for that matter. So again, it's not repetitive when you acknowledge good work. So I'd like to add that too there. If there are no further announcements, we have a need to go into an executive session, and I'll ask the city attorney to read the parameters.
The motion would be to recess into executive session not to exceed 20 minutes to discuss matters related to an individual employee pursuant to KSA 754319B1. The open meeting will resume in the City Council chambers. The following staff may be needed to assist the governing body in its deliberations: Interim City Manager Cochran and other staff he deems necessary.
So we've heard the need for an executive session. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to go into executive session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Vote aye. Okay, we will recess for a time limit of 20 minutes. We'll give everybody a chance to clear the room. Take a break. Break for about 5 minutes.
That door is locked, by the way.
Yeah, I saw it, but I wait for you to knock.
Okay, we're coming out of executive session. No action has been taken. There being no further business before this body, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Giddy up. Giddy up.